What's going on, y'all? Dom here from Lens Pro To Go and Lens Rentals. Welcome back to the channel. So in this week's video, I just want to give you like a overview slash things I think you need to know about the Canon EOS R7, one of the latest additions to the Canon mirrorless family, which is getting to be a pretty healthy collection of camera bodies, by the way. But regardless, in this week's video, we're just going to be talking about what Canon is giving us in terms of photo and video capabilities with the EOS R7. And also, we just want to briefly talk about who the ideal EOS R7 user is, because this thing is really neat. It's pretty consumer, like price and form factor wise, but it's also got a lot of really capable and pro features going on here too. And I could really easily see the R7 melding into a lot of different people's workflows out there. So a good amount to talk about with this EOS R7 today. Excited to dive into this thing. I had a really great time over the weekend shooting on the EOS R7 and the highly anticipated R6 Mark II. So be on the lookout a couple videos down. But anyways, for this week, we're talking about the R7. And let's just give you a quick little like elevator pitch for the R7 right now. So mirrorless, crop sensor, Canon body, around $1,400. And so now that's teetering on like the affordable camera side of the line there. Those say this is like your starting out camera and you still need a lens. Luckily for you, if you're in that boat, there is becoming a much larger and larger selection of these RFS crop sensor Canon lenses. This combo right here for I think around $1,800 would be a phenomenal first camera and lens duo. Otherwise, full frame Canon RF lenses will be subject to that 1.6x magnification. So yes, that sensor, 32.5 megapixel APS-C size image sensor. Honestly, a real Goldilocks imager size if you ask me. Larger than 26 megapixels, but less than a whopping like 45 megapixels or something, which is great, but can be a little annoying to deal with just like that pure image size in your workflow or whatever. So right down the pipe, 32.5 megapixels, and all crammed into that APS-C size. And I think that's really going to make for a happy medium between image size and light intake and processing. Now, in case you were asking, because for whatever reason we like to ask this fun question, what would be the DSLR comparable camera body that the R7 is close to? If you were tempted to say the EOS 7D, I would have to agree there. It's certainly not wrong to think of the R7 as like the mirrorless 7D or 7D Mark II. You could also make the case for this being more like the Canon 80D or 90D if you had got familiar with either of those. So let's talk about some of those design and build choices real quick. As for the size, I'd say it's very comparable to that original EOS R, the first mirrorless body that Canon rolled out. Some standout design choices on the R7 that I'm noticing. No left dial on the body here. It's just clean and smoothed over. Definitely went for like a roundish, smooth design on here rather than like a rigid, geometric, straight line sort of design. And as for the dial scenario on this camera, you're getting like this trio of dials here on the right side. Your mode dial is right here. Next to that is a 3-stop power switch here with off, on, and then video. And just hopping over to the front of the body real quick, interesting choice there with the AF/MF toggle switch with the assignable custom function button right there in the center. And don't let the small size of the R7 fool you. This grip is actually quite deep, and I just have a really robust and strong grip on the R7. When a lens with some decent weight on it gets attached on there, really balances things out nicely. Also on that grip is a nice rubber material that is tacky and yet smooth to the touch. Again, they found a happy medium there. It's very satisfying gripping and handling the EOS R7. Now, a few last body things before we dive into like the internal stuff. 2.3 million dot OLED EVF. It's a real pleasure to compose through the viewfinder on this thing. It's very bright and smooth, and I've got to say, flip out articulating screen on the R7 makes the most sense for this camera. I would have been bummed out if it was any other screen design on this thing. Now onto these inputs and outputs. Microphone and headphone jacks get their own little doors at the top and the bottom. In between those, this whole door just for the remote shutter input. Now, behind This door, micro HDMI, makes sense for this small of a body, no big deal, and a USB-C for all connection purposes. And I'm pretty certain that in-camera battery charging is going to be allowed on this camera. Speaking of that battery, the R7 takes the classic LPE6 form factor battery. Lastly, an awesome feature, we've got two UHS Type 2 SD card slots. There's a lot of great options for shooting to these cards. Again, very pro feature that they could have easily excluded from the R7. They're clearly thinking about those professional shooters. And with that, let's finally talk about some of the performance type things going on with the R7. Let's talk about photo first. I'm seeing these two numbers a lot in new cameras' photo specs, but anyways, 30 frames per second electronic, 15 frames per second mechanical. They're definitely going after at least Fuji with those photo specs. I think those are the exact same numbers on the X-T5, which this, now that I think about it, is actually quite comparable to. But also, we get two really neat RAW shooting functions. We're getting a RAW burst mode. Flip this on and then you'll see this buffer bar right here on the screen. It'll show you how many images it can hold in that buffer considering whatever shooting mode you're in. Another neat thing, it's actually kind of tangent to this, it's in the same menu setting, but there's also RAW pre-shooting. With this on, keeping your finger on a half press of the shutter will take about a half second's worth of images before you actually decide to fully press down. And you'll see how many images that's actually calculating in on that little bar depending on which drive mode you're in. Whenever it turns red, you have to wait for the buffer to entirely clear before you can start shooting again. Very neat setting and a quite professional one. I've also got to say, before we dive into video, I was really impressed with two performance-based things, and they're big ones. IBIS and continuous autofocus. My first real test of the EOS R7, I was shooting a MotoGP event. Very fast moving subjects, probably some of the fastest moving subjects you'll ever shoot. I was floating around this event. I was able to just zip around that track, post up, most of the time not on a monopod or tripod, quickly set up my shot, have it nice and stabilized, and I could also rely on that really fast subject tracking to put that blue box around those motorcycles that were absolutely zipping by. I did not know how well the R7 was going to handle that. Sure, it failed to grab focus on some subjects that I thought were pretty obvious. I was impressed with the R7. This was my setup, by the way, for that entire day, and I couldn't have been any more thrilled with it. The EOS R7 and this 100 to 400 variable aperture. This whole setup is like no pounds. Now, if that wasn't good enough for you, the R7 is boasting some pretty impressive video stats here too. Now, and if you want to talk about a callback to the EOS 7D, that's what makes the R7 really remind me of the 7D. A crop sensor photo powerhouse, but it also offered some really impeccable video capture using the entire full frame sensor area. Now, apply that thinking to the EOS R7 and you'll see exactly what I mean. First of all, 4K up to 60p with no image crop. Awesome, and equally awesome if you ask me, if not more awesome, depending on where you gauge your scale of awesomeness, in its fine mode, oversampling the entire 7K image area into a very detail-rich frame. Now, this is something to consider because remember, we're on that crop sensor APS-C size. Anything that's not using that entire sensor area is encroaching on maybe poor performance in low light, not dealing with motion so well, getting that 7K oversample from the entire sensor area. Love that they included that with this thing. Another thing that's making me think of the X-T5 again. X-T5 comparison video? Thumbnail face? So 4K video oversampled from the entire sensor area. Love that. Flip that screen out and now we're vlogging in a very crisp and detailed 4K 30p video. With these RFS lenses, we get that true focal length on the lens here, so I know vlogging at 18 millimeters is a true 18, not doing any focal length math. This little scenario here is going to be an excellent option for anybody that's vlogging or doing any front-facing action. Last little video detail I'll mention is we have a log profile in the EOS R7 C-Log 3. It's going to be your only log option, but it's just that, an option. If you wanted to shoot in a color mode with much more latitude, much more room to play in post. So if I were to share a couple of final thoughts on the EOS R7, this would be the time, because this is in the final thoughts chapter of the video now. The EOS R7 is definitely a camera that I think a lot of people have been waiting for. If you were thinking about making that scary leap to buying a multiple thousands dollar camera setup, you gotta put a lot into thought there. You don't want to be overpaying for something that Canon is just going to roll the same thing of out later in the year, grammar. Like maybe a lot of people prematurely got that original EOS R. It was Canon's first mirrorless camera. It was very exciting. But then they rolled out a lot of other camera bodies, and like I'm looking at this thing, that if I got that original EOS R, I'd be like, I really should have stuck it out for the R7. It is pretty densely packed with a lot of pro features. So there's that, and then on the other side of the coin, it's very nimble and lightweight and intuitive to use, things that I feel like are always on Canon's mind when they're on the fence between pro and consumer, like this, prosumer, as they say. The EOS R7 would be very friendly to just leisurely sort of carry around on a vacation or a trip or something, take some family or food pictures at home. But then I could absolutely see this flawlessly working into like an A cam, B cam scenario for photo or video. Say for photo, you've got your EOS R5 or R6. This is a great opportunity to have this body be a more nimble, lightweight, fly in and fill in the gaps sort of camera. It's begging for that. On the video side of things, for your A cam, you're rolling maybe a Canon C70 in one of those really chunky bitrate recording modes it has. Have the R7 taking some of that 4K fine video, oversampled from the whole sensor area, take it in C-Log 3. You have perfectly usable B cam footage from a Canon camera that could seamlessly fit in with a lot of that footage. I personally would completely use the R7 for that use. So yeah, I really think that the EOS R7 is like a Goldilocks camera. They found a really happy medium on a lot of the choices they made with the R7, inside and out. Honestly, I wasn't even thinking about it until I started to record this video, but there is a case there to make a Fujifilm X-T5 versus Canon EOS R7 video. Let me know if you would like to see any content like that. Speaking of versus content, I would really like to do a Canon EOS R3 versus Nikon Z9. As for this video, if you had any questions about the Canon EOS R7 or any of the gear we talked about in this video today, you know what to do. Drop a comment in the comment section below and we'll start a discussion. Also, if you happen to like this video, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button underneath this video. I'll wait. Thank you. That was a very kind gesture. And if you didn't do any of that, you could also just hit that subscribe button. 101,000+ of you have already nailed that subscribe button because you love this content we roll out week in and week out, and you want to see it keep coming. You could take it a step further by hitting that little bell button that's next to the subscribe button. That will keep you notified when we do so. So people, let me know in the comment section, what do you think is the cream of the crop right now? The EOS R7 or the Fujifilm X-T5? Let me know in the comment section, and we'll see you in the next one.